What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rantin Review. We're talking today about AEW from this past week. Of course, Wednesday night they had the Dynamite show following up AEW Revolution, and some pretty big things came out of that show. Some things we didn't expect, and some things that didn't quite explain what they wanted it to explain. But before we get into all of that, I want to remind you guys, of course, as always, this is YouTube, so, notification bell. If you click on that, it'd be pretty cool. If you clicked on the like button, it'd be pretty cool. But if you dropkick the subscribe button, that, my friends, is what YouTube wants to see. Well, actually wants to see all of that. But anyway, doing all that stuff helps out the channel. It helps other people be able to find the video and suggest it to them. So I definitely appreciate you guys helping out with that. My subscription page for my mailing list is down below. You can check that out if you want to keep up to date in case anything weird happens on YouTube again, or whatever. Just keep up to date with new stuff and when I have exclusive content coming out. So a couple big things happened on Dynamite this week, and I wanted to talk about the big stuff. Let's start with the Darby Allin defense of the TNT Championship against Scorpio Sky. I thought this was placed well on the show. I think it gave it enough. The match had enough time to breathe. You didn't have to worry about running out of time at the end of the show. So as a main event match, even though it wasn't technically the main event of the show, it did everything it needed to do. I've always been concerned about Darby Allin being a champion defending against almost everybody on the roster outside of Marco Stunt, who's bigger than him. But they play it very well. I mean, he's been doing this a long time, obviously, so he's an expert on trying to utilize his size in the right way against bigger athletes. Scorpio Sky, of course, is always amazing. There were two transitions or encounters in this match which were just seamless. The timing was just perfect. It looked great. Scorpio Sky definitely, and you can already see AEW is going to be putting a lot behind him, and they moved him out of SCU into doing his own thing as a single star. And Darby Allin's already a big star. It's just now how much bigger of a star is he going to get. Allin retained the TNT Championship in this match of a small package. Scorpio Sky, however, going after the injury. Now, the injury is something that I'm curious about whether that was a real injury or a shoot injury, or a worked injury, I should say, because it did look like one of the early spots in the match that Darby got hung up trying to do his flip over Scorpio Sky from the outside back in, and then he landed weird on his ankle and looked like he legitimately twisted it or something. But after the match, Scorpio Sky, who hadn't gone after it during the match, did this classic face turning heel thing because he didn't win in the match being a face. So afterwards he pulled on Darby's ankle, put him in an ankle lock, and then smiled afterwards and did the whole looking at the hands. I have evil here. Yeah, he did that whole thing, and it is what it is. But I think Scorpio Sky being a heel, the one thing is him being a conceited heel when you already have Kenny Omega as a conceited heel at the top of the food chain might be a little bit redundant. That is a problem that AEW has had, of doing the same storyline with multiple people at the same time. But we'll see. We'll see what twist they put on it in the future. But I do like the fact that now Scorpio Sky is finally getting those feature spots now. The Inner Circle diatribe, the little war summit at the end, that's the big thing everybody's really talking about. And they did a great job of subverting this old storyline. As I said earlier, sometimes AEW gets into this trap where it just kind of keeps redoing the same storyline with multiple people at the same time. But this one, whether or not MJF was taking over the Inner Circle, which we all thought this was going to, because we've seen it before, and certain other companies, they're used to just recycling the same thing over and over again. This, however, was subverting that whole storyline and throwing a big twist on it that nobody really saw coming. So MJF's in the ring, and then Sammy Guevara shows up in the Summit. We haven't seen Sammy for a couple weeks since he quit the Inner Circle. And he got up there, and he's like, hey, Chris, look at this video. And he showed the video of MJF trying to rally Santana Ortiz and Jake Hager against Jericho. And tonight we're going to have a new direction. We're going to have a new leader for the Inner Circle. And that leads him going back to the ring, and it's like, oh, MJF is caught. But then they do multiple swerves, which was pretty cool. The first one was where they had MJF, and it looked like he was on one side of the ring, and Jake Hager, Santana Ortiz had joined his side, and it was Sammy and Jericho on the other side. It's like, oh, okay, so that could make sense. That's why Sammy broke off. So it's going to be the Sex Gods, and then MJF's going to get the rest of the faction. But then they swerved you again, and it was beautiful how they did it. The guys went to the middle of the ring, and MJF was like, go get him. And they all turned on MJF, and it was like, oh, this is brilliant, right? They weren't finished. MJF's cowering in the corner, and he's going, don't beat me up. I wasn't trying to do this. I wasn't trying to take over your faction because I was busy building my own. And I was like, what? Wait, who's he talking about? So then, of course, the way AEW is right now, racing through your mind. Well, wait, who's in Impact? Who's in New Japan? Who anybody leaving WWE? Maybe he got some other people. And it turned out, he actually is, I'm not going to say fourth, but he is now the leader of a faction that we have already seen for quite some time in AEW, kind of muddling its way together, and that's FTR, along with Tully Blanchard. Tully Blanchard also managing Shawn Spears, so that was 3 of them with a manager, and now you have MJF with his bodyguard Wardlow joining it, kind of making it 4 with Tully and Wardlow. But it makes sense because, you got to have even sides here. So FTR and Wardlow and Tully Blanchard and Shawn Spears all show up out of the dark, and they get into a straight-up gang fight with the Inner Circle and wind up whooping their asses. Sammy gets his head put through a chair. Jake Hager gets knocked out. All kinds of stuff going on. Jericho winds up getting busted open by the diamond ring that MJF had. And I love the shot of MJF just sitting in the corner, just watching all of this happening. Just like this brutal boss. He's like, I put this plan into work. I'm seeing it happen. And then he took out Chris Jericho at the end. Jericho, great shot of him reaching for the bat, and MJF stepped on it and then proceeded to beat down a bloody Jericho at the bat. This was done amazingly well, and it made up for much more than what they tried earlier in the night. It did make up somewhat for that big botch fireworks, stupid exploding thing that happened at Revolution, because this is probably the best executed swerve that I have seen in quite some time in wrestling. The last one I remember seeing that was this surprising and this good was a couple years ago. New Japan did a thing where it was a similar kind of thing where Jay White was kind of subverting chaos, and it turned out that you thought he was going to try and take over chaos. What actually wound up happening is he joined the Bullet Club along with Gato and Jado, which nobody saw coming. And that was pretty cool. But this is similar, but the way they executed it, you didn't quite know that, you had no idea that that's where this was going. And it's so crazy and so refreshing to see. I mean, this is what's supposed to happen in storytelling. You take old tropes and old cliches and you put a new twist on them. We haven't seen that a lot, especially in pro wrestling over the last long time. People taking old stuff and then refreshing it and making it new and keeping it interesting. Because again, we've all kind of gone, we know where this is going, we know where this is going, we know where this is going. But AEW, fortunately in this instance, was one step ahead of the audience, which is always where you want to be as a creator. You want to be one step ahead of your audience, not 2 steps behind with the audience telling you what you should be doing. So I definitely got to give kudos to AEW for this one. They definitely pulled this out. This was a lot better than I expected. It was unexpected. And now we got to see where we're going with this new faction. Now, I haven't checked it out yet, so if there's a name for it, definitely put it in the comment box below. I don't think they're going to go with the 4 Horsemen because actually there's like 6 or 7 of them if you count James J. Dillon, who's still lurking around somewhere, I think, backstage. But, it's Tully, it's Wardlow, it's FTR, it's Shawn Spears, and MJF apparently in the leadership spot. That's a pretty formidable faction, and they're kind of all old school guys. I guess Spears is somewhat, but definitely MJF and FTR. That's a lot of initials and acronyms, but it's definitely something that they excel at, and I want to see how this faction war is going to go between the Inner Circle and MJF's group. Are we going to finally get the blood and guts match that we were supposed to get like over a year ago with what was supposed to be the Elite versus the Inner Circle? But now this seems prime for coming up over the next couple of months at the next pay-per-view, which I think is going to be in May for Double or Nothing, to finally get the blood and guts match. MJF's faction against Chris Jericho's faction, the Inner Circle. I can't wait for that. On kind of the opposite side of the spectrum, though, Kenny Omega came out, and him and Don Callus and the Good Brothers try to do a kind of an explanation for it was a very kind of convoluted, round-the-world explanation for why the fireworks went off, and they try to take credit for it, like, oh, we wanted to do it to screw a few fans. Oh, we wanted to do it to embarrass Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston, and they went quite far to do it. And it didn't work for me. I see what they were trying to do. I guess that's the best they could have done with this whole thing. I think it would have been actually better if they had rigged the fireworks correctly this time. And while Omega and Don Callis and the Good Brothers were in the ring, you saw Moxley like hit the plunger like in the cartoons, and then the ring they actually had a decent pyro explosion in the ring while they were all in there, and then you hear Moxley go, "That's how you do it." But they don't want to do that dangerous stuff, which means in the future, hopefully AEW, if you're thinking something is too dangerous to do, don't book it. Because if you don't know how to do it, or you're uneasy about it, don't book that match, because people are expecting something and you didn't give them what they expected. So it is what it is. But the big thing that came out of this is that Eddie Kingston came down. I love this. Now, this was an interesting part where Kingston, who's been a kind of a nasty heel for a long time, we saw him confront Omega and the Good Brothers, and Omega really got into him, said, "You're not going to hit him." You knew Eddie Kingston was going to hit him. He wanted him to. And then Moxley comes out, so they brawl with the Good Brothers, but then the guy who was originally supposed to come out for the interview segment, Christian Cage, comes out, and we get Canadian on Canadian violence here as Christian Cage faces off against Kenny Omega. Again, an interesting matchup. I don't know how good Christian is right now because I haven't seen him in the ring for a long time, but this is an opponent that Omega could work with and get back to a wrestling format. He's been brawling a lot with Moxley. I kind of want to see Omega have a straight-up wrestling match again, and he can probably do that with Christian Cage. And Christian Cage, who looks like he's in great shape, could probably hang with him. Well, I don't know. Let me take that back. I don't know. There are not a lot of people in pro wrestling that can hang with Kenny Omega. We saw the dude wrestle a non-stop 72-minute match a couple years ago. So, yeah, I take that back. But at least Christian can have an entertaining match and somewhat keep up with Omega in a wrestling one-on-one encounter and less of the shenanigans. But it also looks like obviously we're setting up for a 6-man tag with Moxley, Kingston, and Christian Cage against the Good Brothers and Kenny Omega, which could be a very entertaining match. But Christian Cage's immediate focus, now that he is in AEW, is he wants to be AEW champion. He looked at the belt, he held the belt up, and that's apparently going to be Kenny Omega's next big challenger. Now, what's also interesting about this is that if that's coming up pretty soon, there is a possibility, although I don't think it will happen, that we could have Edge and Christian being the world champions of the two biggest wrestling companies in North America, and it would reek of awesomeness, but I don't think it's going to happen. I'm sure they'll talk about it. I think they're still doing their podcast. I'm not so sure because I never listened to it, but if they are, somebody let me know in the comment box below if they've mentioned that yet. I don't think either one of them are going to win those titles, to be quite honest. I don't see Roman losing to Edge. It could happen, and I don't see Kenny Omega losing to Christian, so we'll see. But it's a possibility. It could be a fun thing to work with and a fun fan theory to go with. But overall, do I think AEW has recovered from the big botch at the end of AEW Revolution? I think this Dynamite did. It was one of the better Dynamites, so I think it did help kind of wash that nasty taste out of the mouth. Again, the explanation they tried to come up with, that Omega and Don Callus were doing it to screw with their fans and screw. That still didn't work for me, but what they followed it up with was better. And again, the Darby Allin match was pretty good with Scorpio Sky, and at the end, the Inner Circle, the swerve MJF pulled on the Inner Circle, and the swerve to the swerve to the swerve, that was great. That was expertly done. So I'm definitely giving a recommendation to this week's AEW Dynamite if you haven't seen it. And let's see where they go on. Now, the new show, Elevation, is coming out on Monday, so we're going to start that. Speaking of which, Eddie Kingston is now a face, apparently. Buddy and the Blade are no longer associated with him in the family, so that seems kind of like an abrupt... They had to kind of do something. That seems out of nowhere. And now they're part of Matt Hardy's brand. And, there's they're shaking up stuff, which they usually do after pay-per-views, so we're seeing where the next 3 months of AEW is going to go. But I want to know what you guys thought about this. Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. Until then, I will see you guys for more news, rumors, and commentary right here on The Rantin Review. Have a good day.